Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to ULT San Diego for our presentation, the Aquarian series, the title of which tonight is Deity and Law. And that will be given to us by Kirk Grady. Before we begin, I would like to do a reading. From the voice of the silence. On Sawan's path, O Shotapati, thou art secure. Aye, on that marga, where naught but darkness meets the weary pilgrim, where torn by thorn the hands drip blood, the feet are cut by sharp, unyielding flints, and Mara wields his strongest arms, there lies a great reward immediately beyond. Calm and unmoved, the pilgrim glideth up the stream that to nirvana leads. He knoweth that the more his feet will bleed, the whiter will himself be washed. He knoweth well that after 7 short and fleeting births, nirvana will be his. Such is the dhyana path, the haven of the yogi, the blessed goal that Shrotapatis crave. Not so when he hath crossed and won the Aryahata path. There klesha is destroyed forever, Tana's roots torn out. But stay, disciple, yet one word. Canst thou destroy divine compassion? Compassion is no attribute, it is the law of laws, eternal harmony, Alaya's self. A sureless universal essence, the light of everlasting right and fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. The more thou dost become at one with it, thy being melted in its being, the more thy soul unites with that which is, the more thou wilt become compassion absolute. Such is the Arya path, path of the Buddhas of perfection. Withal, what mean the sacred scrolls which make thee say, Om? I believe it is not all the arhats that get of the nirvanic path the sweet fruition. Om. I believe that the nirvana dharma is entered not by all the Buddhas. Yea, on the Arya path, thou art no more Shrotapati, thou art a bodhisattva. The stream is crossed, 'tis true, thou hast a right to Dharmakaya vesture. But Sambhogakaya is greater than a Nirvani, and greater still is a Nirmanakaya, the Buddha of compassion. Now bend thy head and listen well, O Bodhisattva. Compassion speaks and saith, can there be bliss when all that lives must suffer? Shalt thou be saved and hear the whole world cry? Now thou hast heard that which was said. Thou shalt attain the 7th step and cross the gate of final knowledge, but only to wed woe, if thou wouldst be Tathagata. Follow upon the predecessor's steps, remain unselfish till the endless end. Thou art enlightened, choose thy way. Behold, the mellow light that floods the eastern sky. In signs of praise, both heaven and earth unite. And from the fourfold manifested powers, a chant of love ariseth, both from the flaming fire and flowing water, and from sweet smelling earth and rushing wind. Hark, from the deep unfathomable vortex of that golden light in which the victor bathes, all nature's wordless voice in thous in thousand tones ariseth to proclaim. Joy unto ye, O men of Mialba, a pilgrim hath returned back from the other shore. A new Arhan is born, peace to all beings. We give you now our very own Gradine.
Thank you, Monica, for that lovely reading. And thanks everyone for joining in for this presentation today. And the ULT Lodge in San Diego for holding this Aquarian series. We're going to start with another short quote from H.P. Blavatsky. The evolution of the God idea proceeds apace with man's own intellectual evolution. So true it is that the noblest ideal to which the religious spirit of one age can soar will appear but a gross caricature to the philosophic mind in a succeeding epoch. The philosophers themselves had to be initiated into perceptive mysteries before they could grasp the correct idea of the ancients in relation to this most metaphysical subject. In 1848, at the age of 17, H.P. Blavatsky left behind what would have been a cultured life of luxury, comfort, and ease to seek in unknown esoteric centers throughout the globe, which she called the Philosopher's Stone, and those who could show her the path to, quote, the union of soul and spirit. She did so, as she later wrote in Isis Unveiled, because two ever-recurring questions oppressed her. Who, what, where is God? And who ever saw the immortal spirit of man so as to be able to assure himself of man's immortality? Clearly, this was no mere intellectual curiosity, but a soul-gripping search for truth. She later wrote in Isis that it was while most anxious to solve these perplexing questions that she eventually came into contact with Mahatmas, true seers and adepts, one of whom had guarded her since birth. And as part of a deathless brotherhood of bodhisattvas, she found they were endowed with such mysterious powers of thought and speech and action, accompanied by a profound and penetrating knowledge of the hidden laws of nature, that they were able to demonstrate to her irrefutably the unity of theology and science, the three-in-one of God, humanity, and nature. Through their blessing, she obtained proof of a once universal science of spirituality called the wisdom religion, Theosophia, or Gupta Vidya, the origin and source of every great spiritual tradition, whereby the immortality of man's spirit may be demonstrated like a problem of Euclid. On the path they revealed, she found that blind faith is supplanted by omniscient knowledge of universal unity and causation, karma and reincarnation, along with every law and hidden domain of divine nature governing the whole of life. Crowning all, as we heard in the reading, was the law of laws, compassion absolute, by which the adept eventually re-becomes a godlike Nirmanakaya, the Word made flesh, a selfless servant of the whole, and a deathless ambassador mirroring deity on earth. Moreover, by this brotherhood, she was given the mission to share what she had been taught at great risk to herself, knowing that she would be assassinated in the court of public opinion and abandoned even by those whom she had helped the most. And this she did to her dying breath in strict obedience to her teachers and on behalf of humanity as part of a 7th-century plan designed to reestablish this mystic gnosis, which had been kept secret for millennia in the mystery schools of antiquity. In the last 3 years of her life, HPB wrote her most stinging indictments of modern civilizations, words which today seem utterly contemporary. In the midst of the widespread economic growth of the Second Industrial Revolution, which included the first steam engines, continental railroads, and electrical grids, she wrote, "All the progress and glittering innovations of modern civilization are skin deep and due to selfishness and materialism, the greatest curses of all nations. Materialism and indifference to all save the selfish realization of wealth and power, and the overfeeding of national and personal vanity have gradually led nations and men to the almost entire oblivion of spiritual ideals, of the love of nature, to the correct appreciation of things. So-called Western civilization showed to her the utter failure of 2,000 years of Christendom, where the teaching of Jesus, whose real name, she said, was Joshua ben Pandira, had been edited, inverted, and co-opted by churches and by ruthless criminal governments for position, power, and wealth to hypnotize, manipulate, and profit from the masses. The sublime ethics of the Sermon on the Mount was being trampled by, quote, a hideous leprosy, canting, deceitful, hypocritical, and vain, from its diplomats down to its salaried priests, from its political down to its social laws, greedy and brutal beyond expression. As the harvesting and burning of fossil fuels took root, she observed even then, climates are changing and the face of the whole world will soon be altered. The destruction of primeval forests and of animal species was another vivid display of the barbarous, shameful, and murderous hand of the pioneers of civilization. Today, there's no denying these tragic trends are still unfolding on the world stage, reaching monstrous proportions. But despite seeing all this clearly and the barbarity of it all, and knowing that we were on the eve of 2 world wars, she also wrote that we are now facing all the glorious possibilities of the future. Once again, the hour has struck for the great periodical return of the rising tide of mystic thought. We are surrounded on all sides by the ocean of universal science, the science of life eternal, bringing in its waters the buried and long forgotten treasures of vanished generations, treasures still unknown to the modern civilized races. Now is the time for action by all who see the sterility and foolishness of an existence blinded by materialism and so ferociously indifferent to the fate of others. It is for them to devote their best energies, all their courage, and all their efforts to bring about an intellectual reform. This reform cannot be accomplished except through theosophy, and let us say it, occultism, or the wisdom of the East. If theosophia, properly understood and awakened on behalf of the whole, could begin to permeate the race mind, she taught, it would lead to widespread reforms, to reconciliation, tolerance, and justice, harmony, mutual service, charity, and genuine brotherhood amongst all peoples, races, and nations. A complete, nonviolent revolution without one drop of blood spilt. And this, both she, W.Q. Judge, and Robert Crosby all wrote, was in preparation for the 20th century, where, following cyclic law, a new torchbearer would arise to carry on and extend the work she had begun. The gradual assimilation by mankind of great spiritual truths will alone revolutionize the face of civilization and ultimately result in a far more effective panacea for evil than the mere tinkering of superficial misery. Prevention is better than cure. Theosophy teaches that the fundamental axiom, the once universal conception behind what we call deity, is an omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle, which is beyond all speculation. Quote, since it transcends the power of human thought and conception and would only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. Self-existent and causeless, it cannot be named or defined, but has been given many names. In the Upanishads, it is Brahman or Parabrahm, the one without a second. In the Kabbalah, it is Ein Sof, meaning no thing. In Sufism, Al-Haq, the real. In the Chandogya Upanishad, it is in the Sanskrit simply Tat, or that, and the one true self of every being. While it may initially appear to the finite intellect as utter darkness and absolute unconsciousness, HPB wrote, it becomes for the mystic a gray twilight, and for the fully awakened seer, absolute light. That thou art. Because it includes both being and non-being, HPB called it beingness, never ceasing to exist, whether there is a cosmos or not. Buddhism calls it shunyata, and in Mahayana scriptures, also the Tathagata Garbha, both void and boundless womb of potentiality within which everything else arises. Transcending both nirvana and samsara, it is the non-dual fusion of spirit and matter, the highest wisdom and compassion, prajna and mahakaruna. In every ancient cosmogony, she wrote, it was symbolized by a boundless circle, referring to both absolute abstract space, eternal duration, and absolute abstract and perpetual motion associated with unconditioned consciousness. And though this unity is the fundamental axiom and underlying assumption of all theosophical thought, the aspirant who would serve the whole must also come to apprehend the logoic and compassionate manner by which the one seemingly becomes many. Spirit and matter, or consciousness and substance, one in essence, and radiating from the one, are linked on each descending plane by cosmic electricity called Fohat. In one of its countless aspects, Fohat is the great breath itself, divine will, or divine eros, that inherent law of universal love, empathy, and sympathy, which propels the triune logos to periodically emerge from the unmanifest into manifestation as the laws of nature. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. In him was life, and life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. And the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. The word of the Hebrew Bible is the Greek logos, the Hindu vak, and the Chinese Buddhist kuan yin. And it is reflected in the most ancient of Vedic hymns, the pranava, the AUM of the Gayatri mantram, only to be used on behalf of all beings. Called the universal resonance or undertone of nature, the triune logos is said to contain in potentia everything that will arise over the course of the Manvantara. And in the second volume of The Secret Doctrine, HVB correlates it with the higher triad in humanity, with Atma, Buddhi, and higher Manas, the source of all consciousness and intelligence, the omnipresent deity above, within, and without. At the dawn of cosmic time, the formless three emanates the active potency of the manifesting seven. Seven is one of the central meanings of the interlaced triangles of the Theosophical seal, the center point being the seventh, and synthesis. The seven dhyanis, or lords of light, constitute the collective, quote, aggregate of divine intelligence, following the plan laid out in the divine mind, and are called the emanating agents of karmic and cosmic law. From above below, from noumenal essences to phenomenal fields, they differentiate into the hidden architecture of nature, the entire great chain of being, the seven cosmic elements, the seven kingdoms, and the seven principles of human nature, becoming all beings, forms, matter, and consciousness, and energy. Without the seven dhyanis, wrote HVB, neither the cosmos nor human nature can be properly understood. For all human beings in the present period of evolution, spiritual growth consists in awakening noetic awareness of formless spiritual essences, a process of monastic maturation which requires precise apprehension of the different sets of dhyanis and ancestors involved in the complex karmic heredity of humanity. The ascent to monadic awakening, culminating in self-conscious divinity, proceeds pari passu with an increasing participation in the sacrificial descent of the light of the Logos into the human temple. This sevenfold host is also the archetypal essence of all cyclic time. They correspond to the 7 days of creation found in the Hebrew Bible, the 7 Hindu creations, the 7 globes, rounds, and races of theosophical teaching, as well as the 7 days of the week. They mark the 7 stages of each human life, and all cyclic activity is governed by the same celestial music of the spheres. Just as every day is followed by night, sleeping by waking, so is every cosmos followed by a period of rest and non-being called pralaya. And this cyclic law of cosmic periodicity, known as the days and nights of Brahma, means that our current existence is one in an endless series without beginning or end. Though inaccessible to the ratiocinative mind, each human birth and the unfoldment of human principles, even in the daily 24-hour cycle, corresponds, we're told, to the same archetypal stages of cosmic unfoldment. The great is mirrored in the small, the macrocosm within the microcosm. And this one law of the one life is the source of all other laws and is also referred to as karma. Karma is described in the philosophy as that principle of cosmic harmony and equilibrium which maintains unity in the midst of multiplicity and diversity, called the good law of perfect justice and mercy. It is no particular action, but action itself. Nor is karma subject to time, we're told, but is described as eternity itself. If the karma of a given system is the combination of the acts and thoughts of all beings of every grade which were concerned in the previous Manvantara, then karma bridges over even the chasm of non-being. Similar to what is said of the absolute deity, the aphorisms on karma affirm that in its essential nature, Karma is unknown and unknowable, at least to the finite mind. And even that aspect of karma which can be known by calculation from cause to effect requires a sage or a seer who has transcended past, present, and future. Only then can the veil which hides the unity of cause and effect be drawn aside. Karma is intimately linked with adhyajna, the law of sacrifice. It governs both the involutionary descent and the evolutionary ascent, following this archetypal spiraling pattern. On the descending arc, the differentiation and condensation of homogeneous matter, which occurs over vast cycles, is accompanied by the descent of Mahat, we're told, universal spiritual intelligence. And when the balance is struck between spirit and matter, the ocean of monadic life, quote, divides into its constituent drops, unquote. This is one way that HPB describes the sacrificial awakening of individuated self-conscious intelligence in the evolving human form, which then initiates the upward arc and the cycle of reincarnations. On the ascending arc, it is karma as ethical causation, which provides the opportunities, the lessons, the checks and balances needed in the self-conscious return to pure spirit. And in that return, unity must be self-consciously chosen, understood, and embodied on every plane. Just as karma provides continuity between one period of manifestation and another, so does it provide the unbroken continuity between one life and the next. It unerringly brings to each soul, each family, nation, and race the progeny of former thoughts and deeds. Every circumstance, every duty, tendency, and opportunity has its origin in the ceaseless creative generator of the human mind. Quote, all that we are is the result of what we have thought, said the Buddha. And this is also why karma is a compassionate law called the doctrine of hope. Each moment holds the exact sum total and offers the opportunity to undo the errors of the past and to build upon the good. And so this equilibrium that it moves us towards is not something static, but in harmony with cosmic fohat, ever in motion. It moves all human beings towards ever more intelligent and universal forms of altruism, the embodiment of the highest ideals and paramitas on behalf of universal good. Every human being has incarnated many thousands of times. Each has participated at some level in the best and in the worst, in the golden age solar dynasties and the dark ages of Atlantean degradation. The problem for many in the current epoch is the almost entire obscuration of our inner faculties of vision and noetic discrimination. And this is a pervasive form of blindness, which is the outcome of lifetimes of negligence and misuse. And because of it, many are currently lost in a kind of half sleep state without a sense of purpose or deeper meaning. The inner voice of the deity, the voice of Kuan Yin, cannot be heard. And the vast reservoir of knowledge that has been gained at great expense in previous lives is unavailable. And this in turn increases our reliance on the physical senses and lower egotism, our inability to recognize true teachers, our susceptibility to manipulation by others, and our willing captivity to narrow forms of sectarian dogmatism, of personal salvation or individual enlightenment, all of which are kind of an inversion of this, again, this once universal teaching. This abject condition is compounded in Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, where everything is inverted. Dharma is made to look like Dharma, Fake news masquerades as truth. Greed, tribalism, and self-seeking are made to seem good, and selfishness is praised as an enlightened and practical perspective. Even in the midst of the cacophony, theosophy affirms that the ancient flute of Krishna may be heard. The seeds of a golden age, in fact, as HPB pointed out, are even now being planted in the black, decaying soil of dying cultures. To keep alive, to reawaken and reactivate humanity's divine intuitions is a central aim of the theosophical movement. And without this reawakening, changes of government or of laws, of educational, social, and political institutions will have little lasting effect. The long arc of true human welfare and felicity, of universal progress and enlightenment in harmony with all the kingdoms of nature will not be hastened. Despite the predominant blindness, every human being, we're told, may have glimpses of soul memory, akin to sunlight striking the earth through the thick foliage of jungle growth. According to Judge, the race mind is thirsty for these truths, and the right word at the right moment may awaken the whisperings of Buddhi. The degree to which a person can preserve, protect, and assimilate these momentary glimpses and maintain fidelity to them, the more they can contribute to the needed turning around of the soul from the shadow to the shine, from selfishness to altruism, moving toward a life transformed and well lived. Authentic intuitions are encouraged and supported by right philosophy, along with meditation upon Bija Sutras, the seed instructions of great teachers. Such truths are by definition spiritual and universal in meaning, but when properly digested, can awaken discernment and provide guidance in the long series of life-altering choices. They can help empower the courage and the honesty needed to correct one's course again and again, to bravely identify and discard the voice of personal egotism whenever it arises, rather than being repeatedly led astray and waiting for suffering or for karma to provide the corrective. Without daily self-study, meditation, and self-correction, one will be propelled further backwards. The momentary flashes of insight grow weak, become drowned out, or are co-opted by the already bloated personality or the astral ego. Rightly used golden moments are allies to authentic soul longings and altruistic commitments, leading to fulfilled vows. The enormous power of a vow taken on behalf of service to humanity is the central key, says Judge, of transforming personal egotism and its insatiable desires. When rightly taken, entirely new classes of karma eventually become available. Rather than narrowing the field of choice, the circle of consciousness widens, and more profound and effectual forms of philanthropy are revealed. Of course, each new opportunity to serve is accompanied by ever more subtle and challenging tests and trials. Hidden defects are brought to the surface, and this is inherent in the paramita path. And it is only in this way, in fact, that the soul is cleansed of its dross, chastised and prepared for the egoless handling of potent fires, which are needed for true wisdom and inner spiritual awakening. The law of karma ordains that every single person has a divine dharma, which he or she alone can and must fulfill. Every person has come into this particular life with a divine mission, which, if they do not accomplish it, wrote Rumi, it will be as though they have done nothing. Nature will provide many hints, but what that mission is must be discovered by each person through a form of Buddhic awakening or apprehension. And the more consistently and continuously higher altruistic and impersonal intelligence is activated, the closer it begins to resonate with the holy beneficent currents and noetic sacrificial mind of nature. And thereby, one may begin to glimpse the golden threads of karma leading to the present moment, the opportunities afforded us under the compassionate hand and the all-seeing eye of the great lodge of Mahatmas, which even now sweeps over slumbering earth, pointing ultimately to the most exalted conception of the creative possibilities of human nature. The prospect is that of discovering one's spiritual and karmic heredity and deepest dharma in the company of the wisest benefactors and godlike guardians of the human race. Progressively and in proportional order, doors of perception and creative activity may be unlocked, deepening our capacity to discern and to choose the good in order to be of greater service to the whole. Raghavan Iyer often spoke of the moment of choice that faces humanity in the current epoch. From one perspective, in the cycle of 7 rounds, it is only in the 5th round, many millions of years in the future, that manas will be fully developed, and humanity as a whole will be able to knowingly choose between good and evil, between eternal life and death. If humanity chooses the difficult path of altruism and brotherhood, of benevolence and unity, we're told, it will ascend by progressive stages to realize its innate divinity and immortality as a Dhyan Chohanic host. Out of loving service to the whole of life, it will joyously cultivate and manifest its Nirmanakaya vesture in dulcet harmony with the whole of nature and with the great brotherhood of bodhisattvas, so that as many as possible can join in the upward arc. On the other hand, those egos who choose to continue serving the separatist soul, a form of spiritual materialism, personal salvation, moral indifference, and ingratitude, will eventually sever the link that would allow them to remain in further participation in human evolution. And HPB spoke openly about this reality, saying that we daily rub elbows with such soulless beings. Any progress made by such an ego, although painful to realize, has been tragically lost. This is the crucial juncture, which is being anticipated by analogy in the 5th race of the 4th round right now. Owing to the enormous retardation in evolution in the past, it became absolutely necessary for the original vibration of the planetary spirit, the avataric vibration of 18 million years ago, of 1,000,000 years ago in the time of Rama, of 5,000 years ago in the time of Krishna, to be resoundingly struck again, so that the resulting karma would force a widespread quickening of choice. For this reason, he wrote, this 5,000-year transition cycle within Kali Yuga, at the dawn of the Aquarian Age and the culmination of the 7th century plan, is one in which the stakes are very high. It is a time of immense suffering, of a type that could only be understood, Raghavan wrote, by a Buddha, a Jesus, or a Shakespeare. It is also a time of immense opportunity for courageous individuals and communities of seekers who aspire to become spiritual and moral benefactors and creative pioneers of the civilization of the future. The titanic struggle between benevolence and malevolence, between universality, sectarianism, and separatism, which would otherwise be resolved in the next round is taking place now in the fifth race. Like the heating of base metal, all the impurities must rise to the surface, be faced and dispelled. The predominant mind forms of the age, whose pseudo-morality justifies violence on a vast scale, disregards the marginalized, which co-opts and misuses knowledge and the gifts of nature for creed, for caste, or corporate gain, are in their death throes. And in succumbing to them or passively drifting along without confronting and dispelling their seeds in our own psyche, we risk being stranded and stranding others. For as the masters wrote, it is not materialism that will have the upper hand. And this is why Theosophia, the compassionate program of the Bodhisattvas, radiating from Shambhala, is crucial and indispensable. The life-giving sacred law is the destroyer of dogmatism, designed to awaken the noetic mind and the boundless heart, to draw all towards truth and brotherhood, and thus aid humanity in choosing to save itself from itself. The time has surely come for a sufficient number of men and women to enact an Akashic model of what the future holds for all. A man becomes a man of ideation when he uses the ideas represented by the wisdom religion, even though he cannot preserve them and use them with the same spiritual potency that once innately belonged to him. Every time he uses them, he becomes more alive, more capable of withstanding the buffetings of change. He gains more continuity of consciousness. He moves from the realm of the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. His is the great compassion shown in sharing some wisdom with those who truly wish to make serious effort towards self-renovation in their lives on the basis of the eternal verities of Brahma Vak. In the Epitome of Theosophy, W.Q. Judge points out that it is a misuse of terms to say that the spiritual nature can be cultivated. The real object, he says, to be kept in view is to so open up or make porous the lower nature so that the spiritual may shine through it and become the guide and ruler. The immortal God within us is cultivated only in the sense of having a vehicle prepared for its use into which it may descend. For most people, he says, the divine triad is not in the person, but hovers, so to speak, above us. It is always joyous, blissful, and peaceful, unconcerned and independent of all internal and external conditions and circumstances of the incarnated being. And it overflows with a boundless ananda, joy and bliss, absolute knowledge, and universal compassion. It continually partakes of the divine state, quote, conjoined with the gods, unquote, feeding upon ambrosia. The aspiration of the student is to allow that light of knowledge to shine through and animate what we call the personality. And this is the great promise of Theosophy, which aims at underlying causes rather than treating symptoms. If carefully studied and taken to heart, repeatedly assimilated and tested and validated through reason, experience, and intuition, it would in time lead us, we're told, to a series of transformative moral and spiritual awakenings, marked by 7 portals and stages. We would not only awaken unguessed capacities of perception and action, but would entirely dissolve our sense of separateness, all divisive egotism and isolation. In aligning ourselves with the laws of nature, we would radiate those excellences which benefit and elevate all the kingdoms of nature. We would undermine the countless opposing factions and callous disregard that now pits neighbor against neighbor, race against race, religious belief against opposing belief, and nation against nation. we would utterly terminate all forms of our inhumanity and cease to abuse and misuse any being or resource of nature. Each of us would become nonviolent, but spiritually vibrant, noetic, and creative centers of active goodness, especially on behalf of those who are forgotten, neglected, or abused. At the same time, as we join with other aspirants in nuclei of universal brotherhood, aligned in devotion and aspiration, we will also progressively enter under more direct guidance and self-conscious alignment with those masters and adepts who have always been serving the highest causes of human evolution and awakening. As such living brotherhoods affect their communities and nations, a mini harmonic golden age would again become evident on earth, where each would be willing to bear the burden of others, and where natural overflowing charity would wisely radiate through all our social and political institutions, as well as through every thought, word, and deed. So we'll close with this quote from Sir Edwin Arnold, his magnificent poetic rendition in The Light of Asia. Before beginning and without an end, as space eternal and as surety sure, is fixed the power divine which moves to good. Only its laws endure.
Thank you, Kurt. Desiree has kindly agreed to be chair today.
Yes, thank you, Kurt. That was beautiful, spiritually nurturing. Wow. I do have an observation, or I guess just in terms of looking at nature and the laws of nature and sound. I spoke in the beginning about when I think of what sound carries, and we know we've done experiments with it so that when we apply a certain vibration to, let's say, a lot of metal pieces, that they will form take on geometric form. It's always been amazing to me because that information is already in the vibration. It was already there. I find that just amazing. And I wonder, is compassion, this bodhisattvic compassion, in the sound itself?
That's a great question. A very profound question. But yeah, the I think the simple answer would be yes. But can one comment on that? Can one explain it? Not really. But it seems to be what the great teachers are pointing to. And particularly since we've been looking at Pythagorean teaching recently, that's the one that comes to mind. That not only does sound potentially carry the most healing and uplifting resonances that we can imagine, but that it does so in a universally benevolent way. That is, the whole emphasis that's put in the secret doctrine on geometry as one of the divine sciences of nature, and the means by which divine beings first pass down their knowledge to humanity at the birth of the human mind, and that it has correspondences. Every geometrical figure, as Pythagoras pointed out, from the most simplest to the most complex, has a correspondence in sound. So there's this mysterious alignment of what we call sound and number and form, archetypal form, so that not only is this this kind of universally benevolent effect that can arise through the right use of sound, but that awakening also can occur through it, that it also carries detailed, specific knowledge, and when rightly used. And we're thinking of one of the stories from the life of Pythagoras, where, as told by Iamblichus, where he was in some village in what is now the south of Italy, and there were a group of young men who were apparently planning some dastardly act, and there was also music playing in the village square, and Pythagoras went to and spoke to the flautist and told him to simply change the rhythm that he was using in the that was the basis of the melody that he was playing. And apparently, by changing that rhythm, this group of men were dissuaded from doing what they were about to do. They decided that was not such a great idea. and there's many examples where he apparently had such a deep grasp of the way that audible music has its also audible music has its correspondence to hidden music, right? That's the other thing that Pythagoras is said to have heard, with the interior ear, the music of the spheres. He was always in consonance with it, but he recognized that others couldn't. But he could also see how audible music could be made, could be played or used in harmony with that in order to affect for the benefit of persons around him. So anyway, it's such a deep question, and there's so many aspects to it. But I just just mentioned a few. So thank you for that question.
That's a great reference, and it just reminds us that within sound is everything. Everything that exists already existed in sound.
Right. Well, that was
expressed.
Yeah.
All math, all geometric form, everything. And it's just an amazing thought.
Yeah.
Um,
the other thing to go along with that, since you added that, is that logoic sound that arises at the dawn, prior to the dawn of the Manvantara, right? That's what we're told, and carries with it everything that's going to arise, like you're saying. It's all contained in potentiality in that word, but it's also containing the wisdom of countless Manvantaras past, right? That's what it's the seed of all that has gone before, and that is appropriate to the current moment, to that limited sphere. If we're talking about our planetary system, or if we're talking about the cosmos as a whole, it doesn't matter. It's carrying that wisdom that monadic stream, all of the monads involved have garnered and preserved and achieved in all those, that endless past. So it's just magnificent idea to think about.
It's magnificent. Judy, welcome, Judy.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're feeling better.
I am feeling better. I'm not feeling 100% yet, but here I am.
Thinking of
Glad to be here. And I want to thank
resilient.
Kirk for giving such a wonderful presentation of deity and law, and for your great question. And I have several thoughts. One is that it seems that you could say that theosophy, in terms of religious studies jargon, would be both a monism and a polytheism. I mean, there are obviously many deified beings in the universe. The Logoi, Thohat, for example, the Dhyani Buddhas. I mean, these are as far above us as just as we are above the black beetle. And it would seem that we need to understand deity very much more as within and a part of us. Not that we want to make a category mistake and say that every person or chair or log is a deity. But I think in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, all things are in me, but I am not in them. I mean, some poor deluded person who stands up in a meeting and says, I'm God, does it, I think, is somewhat deluded. I heard this would happen with Robert Crosby, and Mr. Crosby just said, well, good evening, God. Thank you for being with us this evening. And well, I mean, obviously, this was a kind of a mistake on that person's part, but it's also clear that the deity is within us. The very first fundamental of the sacred doctrine says that he is omnipresent and it never leaves us. It is uncreate and abides in us. And so I think this is worth considering because with our civilization, we have often thought of deity as so much separate from us. Like even Rudolf Otto's Das Heilige, it's a brilliant work in German, but I mean, he talks about God being absolutely other than we are. And this is, I think, not the case. You know, that deity is within us, and I think that is fundamentally important. Now that we have to realize not in our personal self, of course, but in our divine nature. Uh, anyway, I wonder if you all agree with that. Thank you.
Well, yes, Judy, those are excellent points that we tried to cover in our talk. I think that's you point to probably one of the fundamental misconceptions of the age, having to do with the idea of an external God or an extra cosmic God outside of nature, outside of humanity, that that some would say is a fundamental philosophical perspective that is destructive at its very root, because it denies the deity in any other kingdom, in any other being, and so it seems that if that's taken to heart, it also becomes um, a basis by which one can justify unethical treatment of others, and the use of nature for our own private purposes, because it's not really a part of deity, right? So that's seems to be so critical, uh, as as you're pointing out, one of the fundamental teachings of theosophy, of deity being omnipresent. That's the very basis. That's the foundation, the primary axiom of theosophical thought. Yeah. So thank you for mentioning that again.
Yeah, thank you.
Is it Jairo? Are you there?
Yeah, Yes. Beautiful. Wait a minute. Okay. Wow. That was an amazing presentation with lots of beautiful quotes and beautiful images. Each one to meditate on and wonder. And I wonder about many things. Where, where to start? Let's see. Hmm. So, what about the title itself? Deity and Law. So, I, I assume that it might be talking about um, deity as in that or Brahman or whatever, and law as in Dharma, uh, as in mission. And but what about for a Buddhist? What would a deity in that case be? Would it be Shunyata? Mm. And then what about karma? It, it said I heard that it's like in this presentation something like a way to maybe balance things out or get to an equilibrium. But in all of if you take the whole universe, then whatever's happening inside it, hmm, is it really out of equilibrium or out of balance or out of harmony when or maybe if you look at a certain section of it, maybe it looks out of balance, but it's more like a soup or something. So there's really really no way that it could be out of balance except maybe it's becoming something else every second. Hmm.
Oh, those are really good points. Is it gyro?
Hyro.
Hyro.
Mm-hmm.
Hyro. Um, really, really, all very good questions. And start with the one about what would the Buddhists say? Because in Buddhism, generally, we they there's different ways that it's expressed, but in Northern Buddhism, you have the idea that the awakening that the Buddha achieved was even beyond what we would call the gods, right? The gods are mentioned in Buddhism, but the awakening of the Buddha was beyond the gods. And so what does that mean? In what sense does deity apply there? So we didn't go into those thorny issues because we wanted to kind of present the overall picture. But what H.P. Blavatsky was pointing to was that our conception of deity has become overly limited by the association with what we would call the demiurgos, that is the creative aspect of nature, of divine nature, and that in its fundamental, most ancient, and original teaching, as handed down through what is called this Theosophia, the teaching of the ages, the wisdom religion that runs like a true thread, the Sutratman, a true thread through all great traditions, but which has gotten covered over and lost, and is now being recovered. Is part of what the Theosophical teaching is trying to do, is to recover those original conceptions that were at the basis of all these great traditions. That conception of deity is one which transcends even the creative aspect of nature. So that's where you get this idea, for example, in Hinduism, of the distinction between Parabrahm and Brahma. Brahma is the creative demiurgos, the root from which everything emerges in manifestation. But there's that which transcends even Brahma, and which does not cease to exist, whether there is a cosmos in activity or not. And that there are these profound periods, equal in length to an entire manvantara, in which everything is at rest in a pralaic sleep, just as we sleep each night. And that this highest conception of deity transcends both being and non-being. And so that's the way that we were when we started out talking about this fundamental conception of the ancients as being omnipresent, omniscient, boundless, and constant and eternal, whether there is a universe or not. And therefore, it is that from which, that boundless potentiality, from which an endless series of universes arise. So it holds, and it is undepleted, HPB says, by that endless series that arises out of it. And that is that we use the term, yes, shunyata is one of the terms that is used, and it's in Buddhism, which is generally taken as meaning emptiness. But what it is void of is any limiting conception, right? That's why it's void, is because you cannot define it. But it is also a boundless plenum, and this term Tathagata Garbha is which is used in northern traditions, both Chinese and Tibetan canons, is another term that's used for that fundamental reality, which is just pure potentiality, from which an endless series of universes and beings can arise and return back to, and embraces them all. And it's the fusion of what we would call the very highest wisdom and compassion, very highest intelligence, and the very highest love and compassion for all that will ever arise, that has ever arisen, and will ever arise. Embracing the whole in a single unitary concept. So, but in Buddhism was also a corrective to Hinduism, because there was this tendency within Hinduism that was, you could say, grasping onto the idea of Atman as being somehow also a separative entity or self. Even though it was transcendent and universal and eternal and immortal, there was still this kind of conceptual basket around it, that somehow it was individuated to each human being. And that Buddhism was a way of like coming in and blowing that out, correcting it. So it's often spoken of as being a reform of Hinduism in that sense. So that was a long answer perhaps to your first question, but very good question. And the other one about karma, yes, in the larger picture of things, of the cosmos as a whole, can anything really be out of equilibrium? That's a wonderful question, because I think my understanding of that is that you're absolutely right. And in fact, karma is not, we tend to think of it as cause and effect. Okay, so that I perform a certain action, and whether it's in this life or the next life, if it was violent or abusive or not in harmony with nature, that I'm going to feel that effect. So we separate cause and effect in that way. But HPB says it's because of our captivity to very limited conception of time that we see a distance between cause and effect. That in actuality there is no distance between cause and effect, because the cosmos instantaneously maintains that equilibrium. But for our experience, for a finite mind, the circumstances may not come about such that, in this life or in 3 lives, we feel those effects. So, because we, of limited consciousness, we see this distance between cause and effect, but in actuality, no. Everything is always in that equilibrium. But another point to add to that is that it's really only in the human sphere that you can create karmic effects that will have damaging, deleterious, adverse effects on both yourself and other beings, right? So that other kingdoms of nature, the animal kingdom, they're not creating karma. They're karma-less because they don't have that capacity for self-conscious choice and self-awareness. They're acting by instinct only, and they're being guided by you could say that's the intelligence of the dhyanis, where the subconscious intelligence hasn't yet been activated. But because we're at that stage in evolution where now we have to make conscious that intelligence. You could say that's the curse of being self-conscious, is that we have to learn it and become consciously aware of the laws of nature and learn to act in harmony with them. And because that in itself, apparently, that is what transforms nature. It's that whole upward arc of evolution that not only takes humanity into these higher stages of divine awareness, divine intelligence, but also brings the rest. It prepares the ground for the kingdoms below us, so that in the next stage they can enter the human kingdom, and make the same kind of upward effort that we're now making. And that apparently is part of that whole dynamic cycle of the evolution of worlds and systems. It's dependent upon the individuation of self-consciousness at that critical turning point, and then that upward climb where each individuated spark has to understand the laws of unity and the laws of nature, self-consciously understand them and come to embody them. And so that's a few thoughts about a very big question. Thank you for that. Really excellent.
Yes, thank you both. And, we could even say that we're here to raise the matter. Just a thought. I know that is it Monica that's been waiting with her hand up?
Yes,
Virtual
yes.
hand is
Thank
getting
you.
tired. So sorry. Go ahead, please.
No worries. No worries. Well, Kirk, first of all, thank you so much for such a good and potent presentation. It's just wonderful. Just a couple of things. You mentioned the word sacrifice in Sanskrit, and I didn't write it down fast enough, and now my little brain would like to hear it again. Can you tell me what that was? The Sanskrit term for sacrifice?
Adi Yajna. So Adi is great, and
Yajna. Okay. Got it.
Adhi, Adi.
Right. And Yajna, Yajna. Okay. So my question that I had was in many theosophical classes, and this is regarding cycles and this Kali Yuga and out of the Piscean age into the Aquarian, this entire idea. What I've heard is that that we are able, as workers, as divine workers, to get more done, possibly in a Kali Yuga time than in other cycles. And that always, I never got the other end of that. It always puts a question mark in the mind. So, what does that mean? Does it mean that the Kali Yuga itself is in itself sped up in a way so that whatever the comings and goings of the light and the wisdom happen faster? I mean, I don't think I have clear understanding about that.
Mm. So you started out talking about the Piscean versus Aquarian, but within the
Yes,
Kali Yuga.
yes. It seems that that the Aquarian age
Mhm.
is a great opportunity for uh, in fact, you've been talking about us getting away from, which is the individuation, but we've got to get there to leave there. And so I'm
Mhm.
wondering, could you just talk a little bit about that and how this is manifesting itself, or how we're to understand it?
Okay, well, it's a very big topic, but I could say a few things um, about the Kali Yuga first of all, and it was only on the screen for a very short time, but there was a diagram there um, which showed the cycle of ages, right? So
Hmm.
um, that it is the shortest of the cycles, but it's to in terms of Earth years, we're told 432,000 years.
Hmm.
That seems quite long,
Yeah.
but it's the shortest, and then we're only 5,000 years into it. So it began with the death of Krishna. That was the starting point of Kali Yuga, and also points to this mysterious coordination of the incarnation of great beings at uh, critical junctures,
Hmm.
and also in coordination with what HPV calls the great sorrows. That is the zodiacal wheel. That there is an exact knowledge associated with the positioning of the stars and planets, and the karma of this earth, and the cycle of avatars. She says this is all. She lays this out in some detail in Isis Unveiled. Um, so that initiated this dark age, which was progressively darker. So we go from the Satya Yuga, which is the golden age and the longest of the ages, and then there's a progressive kind of shadowing, shortening of the ages, and also shortening of the length of human life, apparently.
Yeah.
Um, but so that Yes, that one of the things that's said about Kali Yuga is that everything is occurring much more rapidly,
Okay.
and this is one of the comments that Judge makes, that yes, it's the darkest, but it's also the one in which the most can be done in an individual life.
Yes.
The greatest amount can be accomplished in an individual life, so it's compressed in that sense. Um, and of course, it depends on critical choices that one makes, and so on. But that spiritual development, instead of maybe being spaced out over a much longer period, can take place at a greater rapidity, um, to the benefit of the whole. In fact, the other
Hmm.
thing I would just like to mention very briefly is that, and no one ever talks about this, is that HVB, at one point in the SD, she says, after laying out these cycles and pointing to, how close the Hindu conception is in their um, uh, the periods and the lengths of solar years in relation to each of the cycles, and how sophisticated it is, going back to the third and fourth root race um, masters who laid down this teaching and have been preserved in the Hindu tradition. Which she says is not the same as the true esoteric, but it's very close. Uh, she also says that different parts of humanity are experiencing the yugas at different times, and don't get overly linear about it. And she makes this remarkable point that while the Atlantean races were while that continent was sinking, and there was this great destruction taking place in with the fourth root race, which we all had some level of participation in, because of this great struggle that was taking place because of the degradation that had occurred over many, many lifetimes and ages. There was a destruction of Atlantean that was the culmination of the fourth root race. While that was going on, the fifth root race was in its golden age. and so and so on different parts of the planet, different portions of humanity, there would be some portion of humanity that's still in the fourth root race, another portion which is participating in the golden birth of a new root race, and that similarly, because we're in a dark age, or because some percentage of humanity is in a dark age, that doesn't mean the whole of humanity is in the dark age. And that, we have this quote, I forget who said it, that wherever there's children, there is a golden age.
Oh, wow.
So and
Beautiful.
it's been my conviction, in fact, that this is exactly what the Theosophical movement was doing, was planting the seeds, bringing to birth on planet Earth a mini golden age, which was, as HPB says, that is the teaching is being given as kind of the foundation of that which will emerge in the coming races, in the sixth and seventh root race, and even the coming sub races, sixth and seventh of the fifth root race, and the sixth root race. That is part of what is being done now. And there's also, just as a final point on this question, which is a wonderful question now that I'm thinking about it more, George William Russell, he who was a mystic, and who knew HPB and Judge, and established and was part of the Dublin Lodge there for many years, wrote many articles, was very prolific, was loved worldwide. He was a real hero, and beloved, very inspiring person. But he had, early in his life, in his teens, he had this perception that the golden age had never really left us. And it was like a direct opening that he had. He talks about it in one of his articles. He was just lying in the hillsides, out in kind of in the wilderness areas around where he lived, when suddenly the hills opened up, and he saw the Brotherhood waiting, for that opportunity, and that the golden age had never left, but that it was we who had become blind to it. So anyway, it's just it's a very different perspective to be taking on, what's going on in Kali Yuga, and this great opportunity that we were trying to, articulate to some degree today of what is at stake, and what we have the opportunity to participate in by involvement in this movement.
Well, thank you so very much. Thank you.
And I would like to also add, when I think of the yugas, I think of this same amount of energy, but getting pushed through a broader and then less broader and then less broader orifice, in the sense that it becomes, in the Kali Yuga, very concentrated, so that energy moves faster, almost like being under the sun at full noontime.
Yes.
But another thing too, just following up with the yugas, it would seem that they are fractals of the same system, which is a breath, and that those, whether it be the Satya or Treta or Dvapara, Kali Yuga and Kali Yuga, that we go through those yugas even on a daily basis, individually. And it could be the case, since it is fractal, that we go through them every second. Because we're working with a breath that expands out and then contracts. And Kali Yuga is a contraction in a sense. If we think about that energy being contracted, it gives us an opportunity, just like a diamond is only formed through this extreme pressure. It just feels like that is what's happening in this constant expansion and contraction process. That during those arcs of contraction, that's where we have the opportunity to really push this forward. What are your thoughts on that as it being a fractal?
Yeah, well, I think there's something to that, and I have a dear friend who is a student of Theosophy who, whenever we start talking about the lengths of the ages and the periods and so on, she's very quick to remind us, well, these are states of consciousness. So we can be, in any given moment, yes, we can be fully immersed in Kali Yuga, or we can be in the Golden Age, or somewhere in between. And that, so it really comes down to a question of choice. But I think at the same time, as multidimensional beings that we are, and this whole idea of that we talked about a little bit, of being ourselves a collection of the dhyanis, and Manas giving us this capacity to understand the whole of nature in the most intimate way, from the very highest universal spiritual aspects to the most, what we would call, mundane, particular, momentary, evanescent aspects, that we can also adopt, you could say, multi perspectives, that we can recognize that, yes, Kali Yuga is a state of mind, and there are lots of beings who are in that state of mind, and will be for some extended period, and that there's tremendous suffering going on because of that, and so we have a mission in relation to those beings. At the same time, we don't have to be captive to it. We can to our best ability, begin establishing centers of thought and of action that are in the Golden Age, and that maintain and resonate with that vibration and share it with others whenever possible. And that by doing that, we're helping to ameliorate the condition for others. So I think there's multiple perspectives that can fit in relation to that teaching.
Thank you so much.
I guess kind of running out of time here. So
Oh, sorry.
I'm running out of time. Sorry about that. I got to use the computer for something else.
Oh. Well, I just want to thank Kurt for just a wonderful presentation, for taking the time to provide your feedback from our questions and comments, and to everyone out there, you too, Judy, thanks so much, and I wish you the best in getting better. And did you want to say anything there to close us out there, Jonathan?
No, just much gratitude to both of you. Kirk, thank you so much. And you too, Desiree.
Well, thanks. All right. Well, I wish everybody a wonderful evening. Hope to see you back next Saturday.